Welcome to the World of CONCACAF podcast. I'm Eric Schmitz.
I'm Jonathan Sleep.
Were you muted?
Yeah, I was muted. Well, I forgot we weren't doing a cold open. So you just want to start over real quick?
Okay, yeah.
No, wait. Just go from I'm Jonathan Slate.
I'm Jonathan Sleep.
And I'm Donald Wine.
And it is January of the year 2022. And we've got a World Cup qualifying window coming up. So let's chat about it. First things first, though, before we even get to January, before we get to the CONCACAF action, we got a Patreon. And we announced this after we dropped our last episode with Grant Wall. Thanks to everyone who listened to that. By far the best reception we've gotten of any episode so far. So the podcast is popping off.
It's the Grant effect, the Grant bump.
Yeah.
We're happy to take it.
We got that Grant Wall bump. But we've got a Patreon and we're looking for support for the podcast. So I want to shout out to our first three patrons who are supporting the podcast, Ethan Zombeck, Jen Glikos, and Kellen Christensen, all now dear friends of the CONCACAF. Thank you guys for the support.
Yeah,
yes,
that's great.
You. Thank you guys very much.
Three down, 1 million to go.
If you haven't signed up to be part of our Patreon, you probably should. We would appreciate it. So we'll
get extra content.
Yeah, you get extra content, and we'll be recording a bonus content piece, another one more round after we're done with this. But enough about the Patreon. Let's get to the soccer. January World Cup qualifying. Donald, why don't we start? Tell us where we're at in World Cup qualifying. Let's hear the standings.
Yeah, so we're 8 games in. We have 6 to go. Obviously, there's 3 match days this month, but before we get into those match dates, let's go through what the standings look like at this point. Right now, leading the table with 4 wins, 4 draws, no losses is Canada. They have 16 points. They have a +8 goal differential. They're in first place by 1 point over the United States. The United States has 15 points. If you do the math, 16 minus 1 is 15. They have a +7 goal differential. Third place, we have Mexico. They are sitting on 14 points, +4 goal differential. And I'm saying the goal differentials because while they aren't important necessarily right now, they obviously will factor into the final standings. Panama, and this is where it kind of factors in right now, Panama also has 14 points, but because they have a +2 goal differential, they are in 4th place. There's a nice little line after those top 4, because after that you get into the bottom half, and there's a distinct delineation between the top 4 and the bottom 4. 5th place, right? Yeah, there's some separation. Number 5 is Costa Rica. They have 9 points, a -1 goal differential. Jamaica is in 6th place. They have 7 points, a -4 goal differential. El Salvador sitting in 7th with 6 points and a -6 goal differential. And at the bottom of the table, Honduras, the only team in CONCACAF that has failed to win a match so far. They have 3 points, only 3 draws, and they have a -10 goal differential. So there's your table. Canada to Honduras.
Well, we're through 8 games. We've got 6 games left. So it is crunch time for that bottom half of the table. If they want to get back in the race for the spots in Qatar. So that's where we're sitting.
We can safely
go ahead.
We can safely assume Honduras is cut adrift. 3 points. There's 6 more matches. So I guess in theory they could finish. They could pick up with 21 points, but let's be honest. If 3 points after 8 games, I think they can just count this as done.
They're not mathematically.
Go ahead.
No one is mathematically eliminated. Yes, that is correct. But
yeah, they're not mathematically eliminated. But they are on life support. Let's put it that way.
But that's why they play the games.
That's why they play the games.
So we're gonna play some games. Before we play the games, let's meet our teams. We'll go through the squads. Most of the rosters have dropped already at time of recording. So we're going to go through those. We'll go in order of FIFA rankings. So first up, ranked 11th in the world, your United States of America. Donald, why don't you let us know about this roster?
Yeah, so it's actually a little bit larger of a roster than we are used to seeing from the United States. Normally, head coach Greg Berhalter likes to bring in 25 or 26 guys. This roster is at 28, and he released it on Friday. And during his press conference, he kind of said that it had to do with, a lot of things, but mainly the fact that he's had some COVID issues in camp and that he's keeping COVID in mind by bringing more guys into this camp, but obviously not too large of a group that he can't manage all the players. So just going through, obviously, I'm not going to go through all of the guys in the lineup, but there's a couple that stood out to me. One, Brooks Lennon, who makes this roster from Atlanta United. He's not factored in any of the World Cup qualifiers thus far. He only has one cap, and that was in a friendly last month. So he makes the roster after going through the training camp that they've had earlier this month. In the middle, Luca De La Torre, I thought was an interesting one. He has 4 caps, but we've seen him at times over the last year with the national team. You have the rest of the guys are kind of the people who we've expected and have factored into this roster most of the time. And up front, we have one guy that returns to the lineup after about a year's worth of absence. He was in the lineup last month at a friendly, but it's his first World Cup qualifier, or really his first important matchup since we went to Cayman Islands back in 2019 to face Cuba. And that, my friends, is Jordan Morris. So
the
Jordan
real
Morris,
important games back in Cayman
Yes.
Islands.
So Jordan Morris will play in his first competitive game in over 2 years. So for American fans, it's very nice to see him back on the lineup.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Personally, I'm excited for Jordan Morris to be back. Like, he's had some very good moments for the national team, even going back to scoring the Gold Cup winner back in 2017. He was scoring goals in Nations League and had a terrible run of injuries. And the one reason I am excited about having Jordan Morris on the team, and almost like bringing in Brooks Lennon as well, I don't know if he's actually going to play, but probably and we'll get to the window, but I just want to bring this up because I think this is huge for me. The U.S. is going to play Canada in Canada on turf. And I think it's good for the U.S. to have a bunch of guys who are familiar with playing on that surface, especially in a game that's going to be cagey because of the weather. But we'll talk more about that later. But that was good for me. Luca De La Torre, getting him called back in, that was good to see as well.
I will say that Gianluca Busio was also going to be on this roster, but he unfortunately just contracted COVID and was removed from the roster before it was released. So a lot of people are asking why he's not on this list. That is the reason why he contracted COVID. We don't know when, but literally as the roster was about to be released, we found out that he had been removed from the roster because he contracted COVID. It sounds like Venezia is in a COVID outbreak at this point, and are trying to get their match this weekend postponed because they have so many players out.
Yeah, and so enough with the feel good bullshit. So here's my Jordan Morris issue. Jordan Morris hasn't played more than 20 minutes of meaningful soccer in a year and a half. This is World Cup qualifying. I do not want, and it should not be the time for a player to find their fit and their form in the midst of World Cup qualifying. We are there to get 9 points. And so I really don't care to see him. This is not the time. Let's March when he's had a chance to actually play. He's not in season. Let's give him some time to get into form. And then we can have it's great to have Jordan Morris back. But right now, I don't think it's the time. The other issue I have, the other issue I have was I'm fine to an extent about John Brooks not being called in. I understood him not being called in until we got to Berhalter's press conference and the reason he gave. He's not a fit for this. Maybe the biggest line of coaching bullshit. And I will preface this by saying that I'm not a Berhalter hater. I'm not like Greg out, any of that, but he's not a fit, and saying that he's not in form. he's actually his last 3 games has been his best run of form as of late. Again, I'm fine with him not being called up right now, but like, don't give me that bullshit.
No, and going back to Morris, I know he doesn't have a lot of like high quality minutes of late. That is a fact. But you also have to look at this like this is a January window. Every game is going to be miserably cold. This is not going to be good soccer. Jordan Morris is the type of player who thrives in bad soccer. And I think we've got a lot of that lying ahead.
I will say,
Paul Arriola is a better fit for that. Paul Arriola has played meaningful minutes.
Yeah.
If we want to like muck it up and play like what you quote unquote like not great soccer, I'd give me Paul Arriola over Jordan Morris in this window.
That's fine. Neither of them are going to play 270, you know?
Right. I think if anyone's going to be playing more, it's going to be Paul Arriola, who has gone through his transfer saga of late, and right now is listed as a DC United player with my team. We don't think that's going to be lasting through this camp, but I digress. I think for Jordan Morris, I think the issue is this, right? He can play in Seattle. Seattle has a lot of terrible weather. We've seen him score multiple goals in the muck that was Truman Bodden Stadium that was full of water. We've seen him score in that. So he knows how to score garbage goals in garbage weather against garbage teams. So I think all those combined mean that, that part is like riding a bike. You don't forget that part. But I do agree. I don't expect to see him that much on the field, because if all of our guys, the rest of our forwards are in camp and they're all playing to the max of their ability, we don't need a Jordan Morris in the team unless we're blowing someone out 5-0.
Yeah. My only other, I think, big omission is I think Jordan Pefok's a big omission for this, because I think you need a big body striker. As we're going to talk about these games, we know that these games are being played in fairly inhospitable conditions. And I think you need a big body that can get up there and either start or come off the bench and get on the end of balls, because I think especially when we get to the Canada game, we're going to talk about not great soccer. The history of the U.S.-Canada matchup is not great soccer. I think Jordan Pefok is like one of the perfect individuals. I mean, Daryl DK would have been as well, but we know DK's had some hamstring issues as well. So I feel like either of those two would be perfect for those conditions.
I think if one guy, I think Pefok was the one forward that I would have brought in addition to whoever was here. I'm not going to go through and say, look at this roster and say, oh, he might have come in place of whoever. I would have just added him to this roster for this reason. We are in the cold. At Young Boys, they have been playing in snow and cold since like October. The man knows how to play in, these type of conditions, and also knows that he can be a bull up front. And sometimes you need a bull. If you're not like, there's not going to be graceful soccer. There's going to be snow soccer and cold soccer. And that is hard. That's rough. It's physical. And it'd be nice to have someone like Pefok come off the bench and just stand over him and be like, oh yeah, I play in this every week. I've been playing in this for the last like 6 months. So have at it.
But you know what that means? It's Gyasi time.
Gyasi time.
Yeah, for sure. The one thing, I mean, we're 8 games into this final round of qualifying. And one of the dumb things about CONCACAF, of the many dumb things, which is what this podcast embraces, is how dumb everything is. So speaking of dumb, is there's yellow card accumulation in the final round qualifying, where if you get 2 yellow cards, you are suspended for the next game. 2 yellows equals a red over the course of 14 games. Absolutely asinine. Just asinine. But at this stage, it's getting to be an issue. So when we go through each of these teams, we're going to go through what their yellow card accumulation situation is. So for the USA, sitting on yellows but not called in, we discussed already, John Brooks, Jordan Pefok, they're both on yellows, but they're not here, so don't matter. The 3 remaining players, DeAndre Yedlin, Tyler Adams, Zach Steffen, if they get a yellow card in any of these games, they're suspended for a game. So that is something to definitely keep an eye on moving forward. Anything else on the U.S. boys?
No, I think we've covered it to death, and I think people listening to this podcast will have listened to a lot of coverage about this roster.
Yeah, for sure. All right, moving on. Next up in your FIFA rankings at number 14 is Mexico. Mexico calls in another big squad. They actually have 29 guys on their roster, 4 keepers, 11 defenders, 7 midfielders, 7 forwards. A couple of highlights just on late transfer news. Tecatito Corona just moved to Sevilla. They're expecting big things out of him there. But the headliner, as far as dual national panic goes, is we're getting the debut and qualifying of Julian Araujo of the LA Galaxy. Of course, as you know, born in the U.S., played for the U.S. national team briefly, and filed his switch late last year, made his debut in a friendly against Chile in December for the Mexican national team, and he is one of the 11 defenders called in by Tata Martino for this window. Talking about yellow card accumulation for Mexico, they got a bunch of guys. The huge headliner, we'll start with this. Hirving Lozano will be suspended for their first match on January 27th because he picked up his second yellow card in the November 16th match against Canada. Currently sitting on yellows for the Mexican team, Alexis Vega, Hector Moreno, Jesus Corona, Jesus Gallardo, Luis Rodriguez, Luis Romo, Nestor Araujo, who had already served a suspension for accumulation, and Raul Jimenez. So they've got a bunch of guys who need to play nice in these 3 games.
Over under. So how many yellow cards are there? Like how many guys are on yellows? Give me the number.
There are, doing quick math, there are 8.
Over under 2.5 players serve or pick up a yellow card ban this round.
Ooh, we're getting to becoming a gambling podcast. I like this. I'm all about this.
Yeah.
Are you talking about during this match or during this window?
During this window.
Over or under 2.5?
2.5.
Oh, definitely over.
See, I almost want to say under. I think that they're going to be cognizant of this. Or I guess reverse psychology. That first game in March is very, very important. So almost like, in Champions League, if it's like the 5th game of the group stage and you're already through, where you're like, all right, I'm just going to take the hit now. This might be a good time to get that second yellow for some of these guys.
Well, the problem with that is, and I know we'll talk about this in a minute, that third match day for them is a very, very important one. We'll talk about the reasons why, but it's a very important one. So they can't rest their guys for it. But also, isn't Nestor Araujo, isn't he the guy that served the suspension against the United States back in November?
Yeah.
He got what Eric said. He's got, this is his second,
and he got one the next match against Canada. Like, what's wrong with him?
Legitimately, dude, missed the most important game they had played so far due to a red card, and immediately picked up a yellow in that game up in Edmonton. Not great. Dude's got to keep his head a little bit.
Hey, Panama. I'm just saying, like,
go
get in there a little bit.
Start some
physical.
Shit.
Yeah, make it a physical game.
Annabelle, do us a favor.
All right. So that wraps up. Any other thoughts on Mexico? Are we good? Move on. All right, let's move on.
I think we're good to move on.
All right. Next up, the Canucks. We're going to Canada. Canada does not have a roster yet. They haven't announced it yet. I honestly think they're kind of scared. That's why they haven't dropped it yet. But that's just me, talking shit. The headline that we
they
do
didn't know what they were doing with their game up until yesterday,
true.
And people still don't have tickets for this game. So like, how we expect them to have a roster? Like they don't even have tickets. People don't have tickets.
They've had a bad week,
which we'll get into later.
They've had a bad month. The World Juniors got canceled. All their NHL teams have had games postponed. Like it's been a rough month for the nation of Canada. But one of the worst things that's happened to Canada this month is their star, Golden Boy, probably the best player in CONCACAF, Alfonso Davies, he's out. And this, we don't have a roster to talk about, but this is probably the headline, regardless of who gets named, because Alfonso Davies, who had caught COVID with Bayern a few weeks ago, has been diagnosed with heart issues, and he's out for the foreseeable future. They said at least a couple weeks.
It's the foreseeable future. It's myocarditis. It's something that has occurred in a lot of people as part of a long COVID symptom, if you will. But I mean, this is really serious. I mean, this could, I don't want to make it too like morbid or whatever, but myocarditis could cost you a career, right? Like, especially the way he plays. He's not like a guy who's just sitting and cutting, chilling. He is active on the flank and up top for Canada. So I before anything, I just hope he's okay, because he's a really, really great player to watch. I love watching him play. I honestly feel a sense of pride watching him play for Bayern, because he reps CONCACAF so wonderfully. And when he was in MLS, he was repping that league so wonderfully. So I just hope he's okay as a human being. And on top of that, one day is able to get back to the pitch and do his thing, because he's got a long career ahead of him. And it'd be a shame if myocarditis, ruined even a piece of that. So I'm just hoping that he's wishing him the best.
Yeah, I mean, just echoing everything Donald said, but he hopefully will get some time. And it did sound like it's a more milder case of it, but the fact that they caught it, what I think is fairly early, should get him in a good place. So just hope he gets better and gets back to the field, because he is an electric player to watch.
A lot of guys, in Africa Cup of Nations is going on right now. I know this is not CONCACAF, but we've seen some guys there also develop similar long COVID heart-related issues. Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang being the most notable of them. Like, he's probably the second. Like, having said all that, like, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is one of the best players in the world, and the Alfonso Davies news is probably bigger than that. So that tells you what he means to Canada and what he means to CONCACAF. Not being here is going to be a big deal.
I'd like to pause for a moment and apologize to our listeners for talking about other confederations. This is a exclusively CONCACAF podcast.
I have a tie-in that we're going to talk on one more round, based on a Max Bretos tweet that ties CAF and CONCACAF together.
That's for one more round.
I'm just giving a preview. I'm giving a preview for those that may want to sign up to be Patreons.
Join our Patreon and accept our apologies. Okay, so on Canada, let's go to the accumulation chart. These gentlemen are all sitting on yellow cards heading into this window. Charles Andreas Brim, Daniel Henry, Mark Anthony Kaye, Richie Laryea. Now, noting Laryea had already missed the game on October 10th, sitting out for accumulation 4 games into the final round. So Laryea is back on the watch. Sam Adekugbe, Samuel Piet, Stephen Estacchio. I'm terrible hitting that one. And Stephen Vittoria. Vittoria also, his 3rd yellow of the final round. He had sat out the October 10th match. So that is your yellow card watch for Canada. One of these days I'll get Estacchio right. Donald, let's move on to FIFA ranked number 49, Costa Rica. What do we got going on in Costa Rica?
Yeah, I mean, Costa Rica has the lineup, or at least the roster that you would expect from Costa Rica. A lot, most of their veterans are in there, because, as we mentioned, they're in 5th place in the table, and they need to get a lot of points, and they need to get them right now if they want to work their way back into the chase for one of those 3 World Cup spots, or even for the 4th World Cup spot, or the Interconfederation spot. So, I mean, it's led by Keylor Navas. He's back in the roster. I know he has been in and out due to injury. He has also been splitting time at PSG, so he hasn't been seeing the field that much, but he is probably the best keeper in CONCACAF. So him being in the lineup makes Costa Rica a dangerous team, because they have that guy manning the sticks. I think also guys like Randall Leal, Francisco Calvo, Brian Oviedo, Kendall Watson back in Joel Campbell back in. DC United fans will remember Jose Guillermo Ortiz. He is in this lineup, but they have, I mean, there's not a lot of inexperience in this roster for Costa Rica. They're bringing in their heavy hitters because they know this is crunch time and they know they got to go.
I do want to note Keylor Navas, he has been in and out of the lineup. Lately, he has been out of the lineup because he diagnosed with COVID. He tested positive on the 16th. So honestly, I was kind of surprised to see him on the roster because I assumed he would be out. Like whatever quarantine he's in, I'm not sure he's going to clear that in time for this first game. But if he does, that's a huge, huge pickup for Costa Rica because he is their star. He's the guy that can win games for them, and they are desperate to win games.
I think for a lot of nations, they're allowing guys to isolate as long as they pass, have negative tests at a certain point. It's not the full 14 days that we're used to having as the gold standard of COVID isolation from the last year and a half. It's now been reduced to between 7 and 10 days. So they're thinking that, yeah, he may have to miss the first match, but if he can test negative and get back into training, that he'll be available for these guys at some point during the window. Just like if someone was injured and you bring him into camp anyway, I know this is slightly different because they have to be isolated, but my guess is he won't join the team until he clears that isolation. But at that point, he'll be thrown into that starting lineup.
Yeah, especially if he's asymptomatic, it may be a pretty quick clearance of that to get in.
Yeah, but he's been sitting out. Like I don't even know if he's been active, like going from a week to 2 weeks off and heading right into crucial games. It's rough. Also rough for Costa Rica. Man, they got a list of guys sitting on yellows. So let's roll through them. Brian Oviedo, Brian Ruiz, Celso Borges, David Guzman, Francisco Calvo, Jefferson Brenes, Julison Bonnet, Joel Campbell, Jonathan Moya, and Ricardo Blanco Mora. Blanco Mora actually had already been suspended for a game for accumulation. He sat out October 10th, and then he picked up another yellow card on November 12th against Canada.
So 10
I believe you
guys on
just
yellows.
mentioned, I believe you mentioned the full starting 11. So just so we're clear, minus Navas, like there's going to be a point where Navas will be on the field and they won't have anybody else.
Notice all the, like, aside from like Kendall Watson, all like the shit houses of CONCACAF, of course, are like, you're looking at Brian Oviedo, Brian Ruiz, Joel Campbell, like all those guys. Of course, they're on yellows.
Of course they have yellows. Yeah. Why only one? Like that's why they're struggling.
Yeah. Well, it could be a disastrous window for them if one of these first two games gets shippy. So that's Costa Rica. Let's move on to Jamaica. Jonathan, tell us about Jamaica.
Yeah, so at time of recording, we do not have a full Jamaica roster. We do have, so they played a friendly, so today's Friday, the 21st. They played a friendly yesterday against Peru where they lost 3-0. And so they had some domestic guys in US-based players that were called in. So not a ton of guys that, I mean, Kamar Lawrence is there, Ramon Howell, Deshaun Beckford, Devontae Campbell, and Corey Burke, and a few other guys that were there. We don't know what the makeup of the squad is going to be once that roster gets released. We do know a few things. So as of this week, it looks like Damari Gray will not have his passport in time. So I know we talked about this on the last episode, was the fact that he is going to play for. It looks like he's going to play for Jamaica, but he doesn't have the physical passport in time. Shamar Nicholson, who's one of their main strikers, he made a move to Spartak Moscow this month, and he has declined to call up. So we know he is not going to be not going to come in because he wants some time to get settled with his team. And it looks like there may be a few others that have moved recently, like Kareem Paris, who plays in Slovenia, who also recently moved, that is looking to, get settled with his team.
Yeah. Speaking of Shamar Nicholson, he's on our list. So let's go to the accumulation tracker. First headliner, Javon Watson. He is suspended for this first game, picking up a yellow card, his second yellow in the November 16th match against the USA. Some of us were there and witnessed that in person, but Javon Watson, he out for the next game. Without a full roster, we are not sure if any of these players are actually going to be in the squad for this window. But also sitting on yellows for Jamaica, Andre Gray, Anthony Grant, Blair Turgott, Damian Lowe, Javane Brown, Kamar Lawrence, Kamar Roof, Leon Bailey, O'Neal Fisher, and the aforementioned Shamar Nicholson. So they got a bunch of guys who are
The only guy that doesn't have a yellow on that list is the coach who just got fired, and he's serving his suspension indefinitely because he fired.
Yes, of course. Headlining for Jamaica is they've got a new coach. This will be his first window, and a very crucial window for Jamaica if they want to stay alive in the fight for a spot in Qatar.
And then we also know, we'll not know for sure, but Leon Bailey is still not come back from injury. So he's apparently getting close, but I think even if he was to, because they will play this weekend, Aston Villa will play this weekend. I think even if he makes the bench for them, I don't anticipate him getting called up.
Well, there you go. So that is our Jamaican squad. Let's go to Panama. Panama. Jonathan.
Yeah. So Panama, looking at that roster, not a lot of names that we would think of as, like the guys are here. So like Luis Milla and in goal, Anibal Godoy, Armando Cooper, Gabby Torres, a lot of the guys that, we're used to seeing with this team. They're going to be there. I would say that I know we're going to talk a little bit more about, things that are, some of the suspensions of players, or not players, of fans, but one of the big call outs is, so Panama has one home game this round, and they actually they're serving a ban due to the homophobic chanting. Mexico got their ban overturned, but they actually decided not even to try to appeal the ban. A lot of that due to COVID in the country, as well as not having the money to pay the fine if they are not successful in the appeal.
All right. Panama's, let's go to their list. Sitting on yellows, they've got 5 guys. Adalberto Carrasquilla, Armando Cooper, Eric Davis, Jose Fallardo, and Michael Murillo, all sitting on yellow cards and one caution away from a suspension. Up next, La Selecta. We are going to El Salvador, and Coach Hugo Perez's squad right now, they are training, preparing for their first battle with the USA. They are holding their camp in Indianapolis, Indiana. I don't know if that's psychological warfare from the coach trying to punish them and send them to Indiana in January, but that sounds miserable. El Salvador actually only called in 23 players. The big notable here, Nelson Bonilla, he has been out of the squad for a while. This is his first appearance in the squad in the octagonal. But El Salvador got some big games coming up. If you go to their accumulation list, these are guys sitting on a yellow card and a caution away from suspension. Alexander Larin, Brian Landaverde, Enrico Duenas Hernandez, Eric Zavaleta, Isaac Portillo, Marvin Monterosa, Pablo Cuned. All those gentlemen, a caution away from missing a game.
That seems like a bold strategy, a very dangerous one for El Salvador, given that you said they only brought in 23 guys. They can dress 23, but they have that laundry list of people who are sitting on yellows. And also, again, we have to talk about the fact that COVID could strike at any moment, and one of these guys could pick up COVID and decimate the entire roster. I'm surprised they only bring in 23 guys.
Yeah. When you're starting your camp in Indiana and Ohio, I can't say they're 2 states that believe COVID exists. that's taking your life in your hands in more ways than one. Bringing
Bold
23
strategy,
guys.
Cotton.
Bold strategy. And
Well, I will also point out, I was like on the Indianapolis thing, that is also where Mexico trained in the last window leading up into the U.S. game.
how'd that work out for him?
Not
Ouch.
great, Bob.
Not great. El Salvador, their social media has been posting a lot of pictures and videos from camp. I must say, like, content's been good. I must say, those dudes look really cold. They don't look happy.
They look
Fucking
like
miserable.
the Jamaican bobsled team in Cool Runnings. Like not
Yeah.
the current one. Shout out to the ones that just qualified for the Olympics. But they look like the ones that are like, yo, whatever hats and gloves are and scarves are available in this lost and found bin. They look like they just showed up and they were like, yo, why are we here? Who brought us here?
What you smoking?
Yeah. Hey, I think they'd prefer that because where there's smoke, there's fire. The fire is warm. They don't look warm.
Yeah, where there's fire, there's warmth.
Sanko, what you smoking? I ain't smoking, man. I'm breathing.
I'm breathing.
So that is El Salvador. Donald, let's wrap it up. 76th ranked Honduras. What do we got?
Yeah, Honduras is in dire need of wins. They're in dire need of just some sort of momentum because, again, as we said, they're on life support with regards to their chances to get to the World Cup right now. They did have a friendly on January 16th. They against Ecuador. They lost that one 2-1, and from that roster, 12 guys were in this camp already. So 12 out of the 26 guys that were called into this national team for the World Cup qualifying window also were on the roster for this friendly. So a little less than half. And I think that's interesting only because there wasn't a lot of experience on that team, and there isn't a lot of experience on this team either. We see some guys that we recognize like Albert Ellis, but Mayor Figueroa, who was the captain, he has 179 caps for Honduras, and it feels like only Albert Ellis, if you took out Ellis, everyone else combined wouldn't have as many caps as Maynard Figueroa. It just seems like that. These guys have a little bit of experience, but a lot of guys don't have experience at all, which is very surprising for Honduras, given that this is crunch time and they need to get wins. And usually when you need a big win in any sport, you're calling in your veterans who know how to get the job done.
Jonathan, you got anything on Honduras?
No, not really.
All right, let's go to the accumulation list. They got a squad. They could get a starting 11 just out of these guys who are sitting on yellows. So let's run them down. Albert Ellis, Anthony Lozano, Carlos Pineda, Christopher Melendez, Danilo Acosta, Davy Flores, Jose Garcia, Luis Lopez, Marcelo Pereira, and Rigoberto Rivas. All on the verge, like one mistake away from missing a crucial World Cup qualifier.
Did you say Luis Lopez was on that list?
Yep.
Oh, good. Then they have a goalkeeper, so they can play. All
They have 10. They have 10 players. Yeah.
Yeah, all those guys can play. Yeah, they may have to play it down. Well, give them Figueroa. Figueroa's the captain. That's fine. But take those guys, run that squad out there for one game, see what happens.
Well, Figueroa is not on that list because he served the suspension that he had gotten for getting a red card back in October.
Which means he's overdue.
He's run through it already.
He has the most experience on the team, both in caps and getting yellow cards.
Gotta be familiar with doing something. All right, so those are the squads. Let's take a quick break. Let's take a breather. We'll be right back. We'll talk about what actually lies ahead here in January. So stick with us. So is that like a fake break? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're back. We'll talk about the schedule, the games coming up, what we're looking for. But first things first, this is CONCACAF. And the great thing, one of the magical things about CONCACAF is how it's just like they're making up as they go. And when you have like the top level, like World Cup qualifying outside of any tournament, this is the biggest thing that CONCACAF has to deal with. And they're in the
This
final
is
round.
Nations League erasure.
I said outside of tournaments. Nations League is clearly a tournament, but all respect to our beloved CONCACAF Nations League. But World Cup qualifying, this is the third round. It's a 4-year cycle. They've had time to figure this out. CONCACAF has decided to implement VAR for World Cup qualifying, effective I'm looking at my watch, like now. Like, I want to know your thoughts on we're just gonna do VAR now.
So
I will say-
I had a few.
Go.
I was gonna say I was saying like I had one thought like kind of going into it. We knew that we were kind of briefed going into this. Why there was no VAR was the fact that some of the smaller nations on a smaller budget were not able to pay for that. I felt that for the better of the game and just the integrity of the tournament as a whole, I think it would have been much better for both CONCACAF, and I feel like Mexico and the United States could have easily and Canada could have easily all chipped in to pay for having VAR at all these games, because the cost isn't too terribly expensive. And so I feel like there could have been more done at the front end to put this in play. But, it's CONCACAF. So we know the refereeing is suspect and not great. So I can't wait for the VAR officials.
Look, CONCACAF World Cup qualifying is like a middle school dance. You got your partners, and every single time, every few minutes, someone calls snowball and you switch. Except this time they changed the rules. We went from hip hop dancing to square dancing. Like that's what we're doing right now. I honestly want VAR to be a part of this because we have been burned by VAR in the past, most notably, or lack of VAR, most notably in October, the United States, when we were in Austin, were denied a penalty, a clear penalty. Paul Aioli gets just destroyed by Jamaica, and there's no penalty called. But also, you want to go all the way back.
There should have been 2 red cards in that game too.
There should have been 2 red cards in that game. But forget this cycle. If you want to even go back to the last cycle, Panama had a phantom goal, and there was no VAR to say, oh, by the way, this ball never actually went into the net or across the line or even approached being on frame. If they had done VAR, that goal would have not even been a shot on goal. That's how bad they missed it.
Yeah, literally VAR would have prevented Panama from going to the World Cup in 2018. Like, right. That's how crucial it can be. And it is great to
most
see.
Most importantly, would have sent the U.S. to the World Cup.
Or at least it will send them to the knockout, to the interconfederational playoff in Australia, which all of us would have gone to. So maybe maybe lack of VAR saved us $2,000, but but no, really, like it's like VAR should have been a part of this. And we talked about when this qualifying round started back in September, we talked about that it wasn't present, and we hoped that it wouldn't affect any of the games. And we've seen it. I mean, it hasn't had a huge effect. I mean, the game that we just talked about in Austin, the United States eventually won. So, I guess no harm, no foul there, but there could have been. And I think now we have it. So I'm glad that we have it. But as we know, the application of VAR is inconsistent at best. And so that is now where the new focus is how do we make VAR consistent and make it where any glaring mess ups can be handled properly. We just have to wait and see if they actually do it.
See, here's my issue with this is, so CONCACAF in general forever has had issues actually applying rules and making correct calls, just in general. So what is a piece of video going to do to convince anyone to make the right decision? Like, just because they see it on the screen doesn't mean they're going to do it. This is CONCACAF. all rules are out the window. This is just another layer for us all to be outraged when something dumb happens. And
go ahead.
I was gonna say, at some point there's gonna be a scrum. Some dude's gonna get choked, and nothing will come of it. Even though it's on video, even though they can review it, nothing will come of it because it's CONCACAF, and that shit just
Because it ain't clear and
happens.
obvious.
Yeah, clear and obvious to who?
So I'm going to call back and you can apologize after I'm done, but there's a reason why I mentioned a particular tournament earlier in this show. We have had the application of a CONCACAF official looking at VAR and going, well, nah. We have seen this because in Africa Cup of Nations,
You can say it because it was still a CONCACAF.
it involved
thing.
CONCACAF. A team got CONCACAF'd at the Africa Cup of Nations. By the way, the brand is strong. Just saying.
Strong.
Strongest confederation nation in the world. Brand is strong. But we've seen this application already in where a clear penalty just basically went and they were like, that's fine. Don't worry about it. Then there was one where a dubious penalty, which probably shouldn't have been one, that really actually affected the result of the game. The Guatemala referee was like, yeah, that's a penalty. That definitely is. And they looked at it and they saw what happened, or actually what didn't happen. And they go, yeah, not going to get embarrassed here. We're going to keep this mistake and we're going to own it. And they went ahead and let that penalty go. Penalty ends up going through and a team wins on a dubious penalty that didn't happen. So we've seen CONCACAF affect itself in VAR around the world. We just have to tighten that up for World Cup qualifying because this is really important. They can't be messing this up. And we know they will. It's just a matter of when.
Before we move on, and we will, I'm glad that you brought that incident up because I just want to point out someone tweeted at us complaining, saying your referee is a scum for that play. They tweeted at PodCAF. Bro, it wasn't us.
The brand is strong, but that wasn't us. So
yeah,
don't blame us for that stuff. But we will accept that because that means that they fixed their fingers to find PodCAF to complain about us. We'll take it. You know why? Because that means that we're top of their minds. We're on the minds of the people.
The dude tagged FIFA, their official account, CAF, the African Federation, their official account, and the World of CONCACAF podcast.
We made it.
I want to, before we move on, I do want to let CONCACAF know if you're listening, we will be your mouthpiece. If you want someone to apologize on the regular for things that happen, for things your officials may do, and for general wrongdoings, I have a price. Eric has a price. Donald has a price. Hit us up.
So I just want to translate for CONCACAF. CONCACAF speaks many languages, right? So I want to translate what Jonathan just said to the officials of CONCACAF. Bring us to Miami, bring us to the office, and we will tell you what's wrong with you in about 15 words, and then we will go to the beach, and you have to pay for it. So hit us up at PodCAF, PodCAF@gmail.com, all the PodCAFs. Send us to Miami. I'll get us around. You don't have to just give us a car. You don't have to worry about telling us where to go. I got that handled. Just bring us down there so we can tell you how you need to run your confederation, because that's what we're here for.
We should legit doorstep the offices of CONCACAF. Just show up and be like,
I know where they are.
Yeah,
I know where they are.
Who wants to talk? We just want to talk about CONCACAF. It's fine.
If we go, let me just say this: if we went at a certain hour, there are some places that we could go afterwards where we can entertain ourselves while we wait for them to answer the door.
So you're saying there will be a party in the city where the heat is on?
Welcome to Miami. Bienvenido a Miami.
All right, let's get back to, pull it back in here. Getting off the rails a little bit here. All right. So January window fast approaching. Jonathan, let's go through the schedule. Why don't you read off the fixtures, and we'll go match day by match day, and each match day we'll kind of pick our game to watch.
Yeah. So starting on match day 9, so Jamaica versus Mexico in Kings Park, Kingston, with no fans. Jamaica will have no fans for the entirety of this round. Then the U.S. versus El Salvador in Columbus. Honduras versus Canada at the Estadio Olímpico Metropolitano. And then Costa Rica versus Panama at the Estadio Nacional in San Jose. So looking at these 4 games, Donald, what is your match to watch?
It's Costa Rica versus Panama, because Panama's in 4th place. Costa Rica, if they lose that game, they can phone in the rest of it, because they're, for all intents and purposes, they're done. To get back into this race, they need to have a very, very strong output. 6 points won't get them back into this race. They need 7 or 9 realistically to really show that they can be in the top 4. But to do that, 3 of those points have to come against Panama, who's sitting in 4th place. If you have a team that's right directly above you and you're trying to leapfrog them, you got to go beat them, and they have that opportunity. So I think that's the match of the round.
Eric, what's your match of the round?
I mean, for me, it's Jamaica, Mexico. Mexico has been trying to keep pace with the U.S. and Canada. It looks like the U.S. is probably going to pick up 3 points on this match day. Canada, they've got relatively, they can get points out of San Pedro Sula. But Jamaica, brand new coach. It's going to be a weird environment with an empty stadium, and Mexico, like they got to get points out of this. Yeah, Jamaica, they can surprise, and we don't know what their roster is going to fully look like, but with all of the talent that could potentially be available to them and the way they play, and Mexico having all of those guys on cautions, like this could be an impactful game for Mexico going forward.
Also, a very interesting matchup, because both teams are very familiar with playing with no fans in the stands. And I know that's a dynamic that has been very, very present in these qualifiers, but those 2 teams especially have had a lot of games behind closed doors. So that really makes it a toss-up for me.
Yeah. And the interesting thing, going back to the U.S. El Salvador game, it's Columbus, Ohio. U.S. going back to Columbus. Okay, that's fine. It's going to be cold. So we'll see how El Salvador handles the January Ohio weather.
Yeah, I think for me, actually, what I'm looking at outside of the Costa Rica Panama game is that Honduras Canada game, just because Honduras is at a point where, like, I mean, if they don't get a point out of this, they're not mathematically eliminated, but I mean, they're not in a good spot if they don't get anything out of this game. And I'm looking at how Canada is going to be lining up, and of course, wanting to see the team in front of the United States drop some points as well. So I think that's kind of the reason I'm keeping an eye on that. That game could get out of hand fairly quickly, because Honduras has not looked very good, but we'll see.
There are no easy points in San Pedro Sula.
Facts.
No, there is not. So moving on to match day 10, starting off on January 30th. The first game of the day is Canada versus the United States at Tim Hortons Field, the donut box. Then we have then we have Mexico versus Costa Rica at Azteca with only 2,000 fans. Panama with an empty stadium at Estadio Romel Fernandez versus Jamaica, and then Honduras versus El Salvador. So I'm going to park the Canada-US of it all before we let's talk about these other 3 matches. Eric, what are you looking at in this round?
I mean, if you're Panama, you've got to get a win. And I regret that in my research, I did not pull up the actual statistic, but like legitimately in the last 4 World Cup qualifying cycles, Panama has lost like 2 games at home in World Cup qualifying. Like all of the games they've played in the last 16 years or so, they've lost 2. Panama gets results at home. And you would assume they're going to here. That might be the death blow for Jamaica. But if Panama can pick up those 3 points, they're sitting in fourth. Like they're in a fairly good spot. So if Panama can keep on trucking, I got my eyes on that game.
Donald, what are you looking at?
So I think I know we're setting aside Canada, US, but that's the match of this window, straight up, period. I think Mexico, Costa Rica is the one that I'm looking out for because, again, it's involving Costa Rica. They have a chance to creep back into it, but also there is a scenario for Canada and the United States to qualify for the World Cup outright in this window. But that scenario, and it's really just one, it involves either Mexico or Panama losing all of their games in this window. So if Mexico, for some reason, does not get points against Jamaica, this becomes a must win for them because Costa Rica has at least, again, they have the experienced guys in camp, but they have some tools to be able to knock them out. And again, with 2,000 fans in Azteca, that means that the home field advantage that they have there is essentially neutralized. And when you have the best goalkeeper in the region in Keylor Navas, that makes Costa Rica a formidable out no matter who they're playing.
Yeah, and like we talked about when we were going over the squads, Navas has been out with COVID. Like, I guess theoretically he might not be available for this game. And if he isn't,
or he could be back. And he could be
back,
just rusty.
But if he's not, that's huge for Mexico. If he is back and he's playing like he's Keylor Navas, like he's the guy that can go into Azteca and steal the result.
So we're not even going to spend time on Honduras via El Salvador because it's the two last place teams. So Canada versus United States. This match, there has been a lot of issues getting just with the Canadian setup. What were you going to say, Eric?
I was going to say, the important thing about this game is the first full PODCACAF on the road PODCACAF trip, as all three of us will be in attendance for this match.
Gang. Well, we have to get tickets first.
That is the most important thing. That is
we're gonna be there.
And we found Canadian rum. So
we found Canadian rum, and I found some that is available at LCBO's in Hamilton. It's like Toronto based. It's not the Bret Hart one that we were talking about on the last pod or on the one around or whatever we were talking about, but there is one that is Toronto based. And so our goal is to find it and try it. Who knows? If you sign up for Patreon, it might be a bonus episode where we just try this rum and we let you know how it is.
Legitimately, we might not have anything else to do the night before the game. So we'll be producing content for that with all the samplings we get from the LCBO in Ontario.
Shout out LCBO. We'll see you soon.
That is the thing is, so the game has been reduced to 50% capacity. We also know Ontario is in the midst of a lot of lockdowns. So, restaurants and bars are takeout only. And so, yeah, we'll have a lot of content coming into this game. But the game on the field, I think it's really going to come down to seeing what Canadian rosters out there. I think if history tells us anything, it's going to be a drab, pretty terrible match. I mean, even looking back to the most recent game in Nashville, that was not a great game of soccer. So, I mean, yeah. I think the U.S. can easily pull out a point. I'm just not expecting much else, knowing that it's an away game to Canada.
I will say this: a lot of the restrictions you just mentioned about bars and restaurants being takeout only, all of those expire on the 31st of January, which is one day after this game, which lets me know actually knows two things. One, Canada does not care about their soccer team. They need to get their weight up. And two, they're scared. They're scared of Americans because they knew we were going to come. They knew we were going to take over their bars. They knew we were going to take over our restaurants. They're going to get all the poutine. They're scared. I'm not trying to be a guy that's like talking trash. I'm just stating facts here. If they were not scared, they would have rolled out the welcome wagon and it would have said, hey, America is coming. Please enjoy yourself. Spend your money here. Go to the LCBOs, go to the bars and restaurants. But now we're just sitting here and we're talking about sampling rum in our hotel rooms because everything else is closed. I'm just saying they need to look out for the soccer team one time. They could have done this and had it where it expired on Friday and had everybody be able to go to the game on Sunday. Just saying.
I think I'm also going to explicitly call out the Canadian Federation for being scared of the city of Buffalo.
Oh, yeah.
Those that may not be aware, this game kicks off at the exact same time as the AFC Championship game. There's a good chance that the Buffalo Bills will be in the AFC Championship game.
Can we not talk about this yet? I don't want to talk about this yet. I don't want to talk about it. Don't jinx it.
Okay,
Don't
there is
jinx it.
a
Don't jinx it.
non-zero
Non-zero
chance.
At time of
And-
recording, there's a non-zero chance. By the
And
time you're
there's a
listening,
non-zero
it's-
chance that if they are playing in it, they could also be hosting it literally 60 miles away from this game. So they literally put it at the same time because they knew they were scared of Buffalo.
Yeah, I want to preface all of this by stating the fact that it's entirely possible by the time you're listening to this podcast that the Buffalo Bills would have done something very Billsy, and
One or the
This is
other.
a moot point.
Let's go
but-
Buffalo.
Go Bills. But as Jonathan alluded to, the game in September was a terrible, terrible game. This is going to be that, but cold, miserably cold. Right now, the forecast high at time of recording, the forecast high in Fahrenheit is 26 degrees in Hamilton, Ontario, the day of the game.
That's balmy.
So it's going to be cold and it's going to be on turf. This game is going to be terrible, just absolutely terrible. US Canada games, just going back like the last decade, have been miserable, terrible affairs, just cagey, awful games to watch. And this game might be the most awful of all of them. So we're really excited about it.
I promise you, and this is not to wish injury on anyone. I'm just going to say someone's going to get hurt in this game. A Canadian player is going to get a foot contusion because they've just come from Central America where it's 80 degrees and the ball is just rolling around and light as air. And they're going to come back to their own country and they're going to watch that ball be a brick of ice and just kick the ball. And literally their entire existence will be questioned on why they exist in this part of the metaverse. And they're going to get a foot contusion. One guy, I don't know if there's going to be multiple, but at least one guy will have to go down and be like, yo, give me the magic spray. And then they're going to spray the magic spray. They're going to realize that that's cold too. They're going to say, you know what? I'll just walk it off.
Yeah. I thought the injury you were talking about was somebody going through a table, but
No, not the players.
You
I
never
mean,
know. You
players don't do that. I mean, they could, we have
we'll
tables.
see. All right. We got to let's get rolling here. Let's go on to the next match day.
So yeah, last match day of the round. So Jamaica versus Costa Rica back in Kingston, again with 0 fans. The U.S. versus Honduras in St. Paul, Minnesota for some godforsaken reason. Mexico versus Panama at the Estadio Azteca with 2,000 fans, and then El Salvador versus Canada at Estadio Cuscatlan. What are you guys watching?
So
I was gonna say going first, like Canada going into Cuscatlan, like El Salvador could be complete desperation mode. Canada's going from cold, terrible, dreary, miserable Hamilton, Ontario to sunny, muggy, firework popping off San Salvador. And that's an adjustment. And El Salvador, they're well coached. They've got a very good structure. I mean, Canada drops points there. Not ideal.
for me, I'm just going to say it. The best game of this round, the most important game of this round is Canada v. US. I think the second best and the second most important is Mexico v. Panama, because as I mentioned, both of them are tied for third. It's goal differential separating them right now as we speak. But if the scenario for Canada and the US to qualify for the World Cup outright in this window goes like this, it involves them, both of them getting 9 points, but it also involves either Panama or Mexico losing all of their games. And I think that is the crucial thing here is they play each other. So if one team is struggling, then American and Canadian fans are going to be banding together to root for the opponent as they try to put the final nail in the coffin with this game. So I think that's the one match I'm looking forward to in this round because it involves the fourth place teams. And again, we've talked about Costa Rica, we've talked about Jamaica. If they go on a little hot streak, they all play all these teams play each other. So it could be where that match is super important to determine who's going to be third or fourth in the table.
Yeah, and
Jonathan?
I think looking at for me, I'm looking at this Jamaica Costa Rica game, but in a lot of that is going to be keeping an eye on where we are at, where Jamaica's at after these first two games. Because I mean, if Jamaica has a good showing through the first two, they could see themselves setting themselves up maybe to be in fourth place by the end of the round. Because a lot of these teams are going to be looking at where they're at because after this, it's one more match day or one more round. 3 match days. So it's going to be kind of a do or die situation. I feel like for Canada or for Jamaica of where they see themselves finishing.
For sure. This is crunch time in CONCACAF. I think we'll wrap it up here as far as the discussion goes. We've got some postcards of the pod. We're actually going to take that and we're going to push that to our one more round bonus content we're going to record right after this. That'll be available exclusively on our Patreon. If you're not already a member, go to patreon.com/podcacaf. Your support helps this podcast grow. Make sure you're following us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram at Podcacaf, PODCACAF. You can find the links to our Patreon there. Donald, Jonathan, you just want to give everybody your social stuff?
Yeah, you can find me at JSlape SSP and then also at Speedway Soccer and Broadway Sports Media.
For me, it's at Blazing DW and at Stars Stripes FC, which is the blog that I run for SB Nation.
Yeah. So thank you to our new patrons. We really appreciate it. Also want to shout out Grant Wall for coming on last episode. That was a lot of fun. And we're going to keep this going. We're going to keep talking. We're going to take your questions. We're going to talk about them on our one more round podcast. Again, available exclusively to patrons on our Patreon. $5 a month gets you bonus content. And we're all heading to Canada for the US-Canada match. So there's going to be a lot of bonus content coming there. So we'll end it right there. Enjoy the January international break. It's not often that we get like a legitimate January international break. So just embrace it. We're just making it up as we go, just like CONCACAF. Thanks, guys.